So, you clicked on this video, so obviously you're a bit interested in the topic of the representation of the actual Norse gods in God of War, but you might also be asking yourself, why is representation important? And it's because if you steer too far from an original character, it's no longer that character. For instance, an example from more recently, the Velma show. Everyone's harped on it already. It's shit. It is. And one of the biggest gripes from critics and viewers alike is that they just took Scooby-Doo and then just made their own characters. I'm not saying that it needs to be completely pure, exactly how it was from 1969, because as someone who as a kid watched the original Scooby-Doo so much, all of them have like no defining characteristics or just personalities aside from Shaggy and Scooby, and theirs is the comic relief coward. That's it. So you need to have some more characteristics, more character traits. But what Velma did was take characters and steer them so far away from the original characters that they're practically new ones. I mean, look at Shaggy / Norville, where the original Shaggy was literally the stoner. He was meant to be the hippie stoner. And then in the Velma show, they have him talking about being against drugs. That is the antithesis of one of his defining character traits. So now with God of War, they had some characters to really go off of, such as Odin, Freya, Thor, Balder, a lot of characters they pulled straight from Norse mythology. There are some characters I will not be discussing. Obviously, Kratos, that's literally a made-up character. Atreus, because even though he is Loki, his relation to Kratos makes it extremely difficult to create a actual character, because at the end of the day in the game he is Atreus first, Loki second. And then some of the smaller characters, Angerboda, Sindri, Brock, I will not be talking about, as they are either very rarely mentioned in Norse mythology or are just new characters. And to start off, I think we should probably start off with the big bad himself, Odin, who got set up through God of War 2018 and then God of War Ragnarok. He showed up. There are some people who are expecting a really big bad person like Zeus from the original God of War trilogy and spin-off games. But Odin in this representation gave a lot of subtle impact. He was not as imposing in his stature or build or anything. His effectiveness was up here, and as a character himself, he was a selfish person, where he did as much as he could to gain more wisdom, and then used that wisdom as he saw fit, as he wanted more and more, and that caused him to alienate Thor, who he was closest to. And at the end of the day, it was this selfishness that inevitably turned everyone away from him. And he was a very manipulative person. And then in comparison, for traditional Norse mythology, obviously he's celebrated much more in that, but he's just as selfish. A lot of the stuff that they have him say that he's done, he did in Norse mythology. Norse mythology can be a little little screwed up. And then, so a common theme with a lot of these characters is that they are their mythology counterparts from a different perspective. It's from the perspective of Kratos, who is already skeptical of gods in general. So a lot of Odin's more virtuous stories about him are now taken from the point of view of a skeptic. So now you're seeing him for the evil stuff that he does. And then another thing is with Thor. It is the same exact thing. In Norse mythology, he's a bit of a drunk. It can be a bit outrageous, a bit destructive, but a lot of the stuff that he's done, a lot of the battles he's fought have such a nice lens to them. They look good. It's the rose tinted lens. It looks better than it actually is. Where he's described in the game, well, in Norse mythology, as being very valiant and courageous and a noble defender of Asgard, but he's a bit of a drunk and sporadically violent ass. And they just turned his personality up a bit more and then put it from the point of view of a skeptic, where his virtuous and courageousness comes off as snarkiness and laziness. And they just made him more of a drunk. And then with one of the other main antagonists, the main antagonist of God of War 2018, Baldur, this one was a bit more difficult because they had to pull a lot of stuff from very little information. There's not much known about Baldur aside from the story of his death, which I will get into the events of the God of War games later. But in the games, obviously, Baldur is used as a hunter. Odin sends him out to do stuff, and he goes and does it because he is invulnerable. He cannot be hurt or harmed or die or anything like that. So he ends up being this unstoppable force of nature. And the story about that is pretty much one for one from Norse mythology. His mother saw a vision of him dying, and she did not want that, so she blessed him with magic, or how he views it, a curse of him not feeling anything. He doesn't feel anything. He doesn't get hurt. But the problem is he can't feel anything at all. So he was driven mad by this and drove his mother away. Which that leads me into a small segment. For Norse mythology, Freya and Frigg, for this game they are combined together, and at this point, many specialists for Norse mythology believe that they are actually just the same person. It was just incorrect translation. But so, for traditional Norse mythology, he's not known. Not much is known, but he is believed to have a bit more of a Christ-like figure to him. So what the developers did was they just kind of took a normal person's personality and then tried to figure out how someone who's normal would turn into if they were blessed with that invulnerable magic. Like how they would go insane from literally not being able to feel or taste or anything like that. Everything is just completely numb to him. So it's a bit interesting. This Baldur was definitely a bit more of a difficult one, as again, not much on him, but they did what they could. And now on to Freya, who is mostly unchanged, because I did mention that in this game, Frigg and Freya are combined together, and that people are starting to think that they're the same person in Norse mythology. But so, in the games for God of War, she is friendly towards Kratos. She's a bit violent at a time, but her main thing in the first game was that she was overprotective of Baldur, which drove her away and everything. She's magic, she's a witch. She was the leader of the Valkyries, the group of skilled warriors, and pretty much all of that is one-to-one from Norse mythology to the games. There's not much change there. But now on to some of the events. A lot of the events are much more streamlined for the player to be able to participate in, with a main focus being on Ragnarok and the death of Baldur, two of the biggest events of Norse mythology, where for the death of Baldur, obviously, he does not die by Loki's trickery like in Norse mythology. He dies by Kratos' hand, but it is the that it is the mistletoe that breaks the magic on Baldur that makes him immortal, which is a callback to original Norse mythology, where the only thing that could harm him was mistletoe, and he was shot with a mistletoe arrow, killing him. And what breaks the curse is he gets stabbed by a mistletoe arrow. So that was pretty close. And then obviously a lot of the rest of the stuff was changed for the player to be able to do stuff. But if it wasn't changed, it would literally just be like a 30-minute long cutscene, and that would not make for a very good game. There are games out there that do have like 30-minute long cutscenes, and that the games are like one big cutscene. Those tend to not be the best of games, I'm gonna be honest. And then one of the biggest events is Ragnarok, and there are some things that are changed with Ragnarok, but the beginning, the start of it, and the end of it are the same. So at the end of the day, the middle part can be a little changed, because it's like in traditional Norse mythology, Thor and Jormungandr kill each other. But in this game, Thor effectively kills Jormungandr, and then Odin kills Thor. Pretty soon after, there's not much time difference in between the two events. So at the end of the day, it's pretty similar there. A lot of characters, there were some characters who had already died, who were in Ragnarok, but it's at the end of the day, Surtur destroys Asgard. Ragnarok is started by Gjallarhorn, the Gjallarhorn being blown, and the Bifrost opening from everywhere, and all the armies come to attack Asgard, and and then it plays out how you would think. Jormungandr dies to Thor, Kratos beats Thor up, Odin then kills Thor, we kill Odin, Surtur destroys Asgard, and then that's pretty much the end of the game. And then there's also some other events, like obviously for the game they were not going to have Jormungandr's birth and Fenrir's birth as being actual birth, because at the same time Atreus is still like a teenager. That would be a little weird. So instead what they do is that they have the soul. Fenrir at the start of the game was the soul of his dog, of his wolf that he raised and everything, and it died. So then he traps the soul in his knife unknowingly, and then he puts Fenrir's soul into a giant beastly dog that then becomes the giant wolf Fenrir. And then with Jormungandr, they find him and Angerboda find a snake that he puts the soul of a giant into, and the snake goes off and grows very large. So most of these changes were to, one, make it more suitable for people, but as well to make it suitable for the game. If it was a game of pretty much just cutscenes and then you fighting some random enemies that have no effect on the story or anything, that wouldn't make for a very good game, now would it? So instead, they change up some smaller aspects of stuff, have, for a lot of the main events, have the start and end be similar and parts in the middle be similar, but then give you the middle parts to do as the player. So with that in mind, that's how the gods in God of War are similar, and also kind of why it matters a little, because the representation of characters and just having different portrayals of characters are important. I mean, look at Batman and the Joker. You would need like 4 hands to count how many different portrayals there are, because you can have people like Mark Hamill as a voice actor define the character, and then you could have Heath Ledger in live action redefine the character in a brand new way that is similar to the Joker. Heath Ledger changed the character enough to make it almost its own thing, but kept the green and purple suit, kept the chaos, kept the jokes, kept the laughter, kept the main characteristics, and then gave him a new personality of someone who is extremely, extremely intelligent, and it is a bit more of a gangster type feel instead of some arch super criminal person. So it's just that idea of keeping the core of the character and then changing the outer shell of it. Thank you for watching my video.